Okay, so we are back with part two of lesson one. Just before we jump back in, I did add another link that I meant to include originally. If you refresh on D2L, the links and resources down at the bottom. Now this is optional, but it's something that might interest some of you. We actually have a LinkedIn group for computer studies. So the group is here, and it consists of faculty, students, alumni, and we post a lot of stuff that we think is relevant wherever, for example, we see job postings that are relevant to students, co-op opportunities, or other kind of related content related particularly to, I post stuff related to web development, like the 20 post common passwords in Canada. So it's a good resource, good place to network, and it's also a really good way for us to stay in touch with students even once they're done here at Georgian. It's a way for us to see what students are doing, where are they working. So I've put the link here. I'll throw it in the chat as well. If you're interested, it can be a useful resource. So if you're interested in the group, feel free to join. Like I said, it's for both current and past students. Yeah, a LinkedIn account, I think, is critical in this industry. We've had employers tell us over the years, Leslie, the three things they look at as soon as somebody applies. They want to see three things. Number one is they want to see their GitHub page. So they want to be able to see your code. Number two is they look at your LinkedIn profile. And number three is they want to see an online portfolio site that shows your work, which is a project I usually have students actually do in second year in the JavaScript frameworks class. So having a LinkedIn profile, it's kind of like your digital business card nowadays that shows people who you are and what you do. Absolutely. And yet you will have a GitHub page full of code by the end of our semester, not only from our class, but certainly at least from Jarrett's class as well. Okay, so we've installed XAMPP. So let's have a look at how this works. So when you install XAMPP, it actually creates, if you're on Windows, it creates a XAMPP folder right in your root drive. If you're on Mac, it will also be either in your root or close to your root. And then if we open it up, we've got a whole pile of folders here. But the only folder we're really interested in is this one, this htdocs folder. So in here, I've got a lot of stuff that you don't have. These are all my different PHP websites, but there's a built-in folder here called dashboard. So you probably have a dashboard folder. It comes in different languages, and there are a few HTML pages here. So if we want to actually run our server and open our server, we can do that. If you open up your XAMPP control panel, it brings you to a screen that looks like this. And what the service we're interested in is the Apache web server. So if I click start, my Apache service turns green, tells me it's running on port 80 and 443. So again, I open the XAMPP control panel and I click start beside the Apache service. And then if I go to my browser, and now I just browse to HTTP localhost, it should bring up the Apache homepage. So I'll just go here. And it opens the dashboard folder. It opens up this index.html file here. So you should get a screen that looks similar to this one. So when we're building our files and working locally, instead of uploading every page we build to the server, we can just use our local web server. Okay, so we'll come back and we'll start working with PHP, some PHP pages shortly. We're going to do another little activity first, however. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pause the recording in a minute, and I'm going to start breakout sessions. I'll create some breakout groups, and there's a link here to a discussion board posting on D2L. So I'm going to put you into a breakout session, and in there I've asked 4 or 5 questions, and I want your group to find the answers and together make one reply in the post, in the forum, the discussion board, answering these questions. Now I want you to put them in your own words. Don't just copy and paste from the results of a Google search or DuckDuckGo search, what you find on Wikipedia. Put it in plain language somebody can understand. Okay. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes. I'll stop, pause the recording. You'll be put in a breakout group. You can use the chat or use your mics. Answer these questions. You can even divide them up. And then as a group, I want you to make one posting in this discussion thread with your answers. And then we will come back in roughly 10-15 minutes. We'll look over the answers, and then we'll start to kind of dive into PHP in a little more detail. Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so we're back. I've resumed our recording, so let's see what we found out. Okay, I just want to have a look and go over some of the important stuff. So Alexander, yeah, absolutely. PHP is loosely typed. So what this means is when we create a variable, we don't have to say what kind of variable it is. So this is very different than what you're used to from your programming fundamentals class with Java or what you'll be doing in your C# class. So this is something to keep in mind, and we'll play around with this a little bit later on. So some of the benefits of using PHP. Okay, so Jackson said, yeah, there are some popular sites, things like Facebook, Yahoo, Wikipedia, WordPress. It's free to use, it's true. And Jackson also mentioned script should be enclosed. It's not actually those brackets. We've got different tags, we'll look at them. Expressions have to end with a semicolon. That's right. And code blocks will be enclosed in curly braces, much like they would be in Java. So thanks for that, Jack. The syntax is fairly easy. Yeah, it's platform independent. It's open source. We've got a big community. Doesn't use a lot of memory. It's true. And it's very widely used. One of the most popular web frameworks. I think PHP is a great starter language. We have to do a lot of things manually, but it's a good way for us to learn before we move into more advanced technologies. In terms of syntax, all our PHP code has to be enclosed inside this opening and closing tag. Otherwise, it will get treated like plain HTML. Comments are typically Java style, so 2 slashes for a single line comment. We can use the number sign. We don't see that a lot. It's also important to note that PHP is case sensitive. Okay, so we'll play around with that. Yeah, now this is critical. In order to run PHP code, we need a web server. So you didn't need a web server for just to open HTML files, but PHP the code has to be interpreted by a web server. So this is why we've installed XAMPP, so we can run our PHP script on our own machines. We've already talked about the difference in strong and loose typing. So thank you for that post from the group by Chris. Really good. See what else, anything else we need. Yes, Idan, that's true. It is flexible. So PHP is simple and easy to learn. It is flexible, it's cost efficient, and it's well maintained. So Alex says, yeah, also explain the difference between a strongly typed language. So for example, we declare an integer. We cannot then give that variable a different data type like a string, whereas PHP will allow us to do this. And as Phcon says, it's interpreted, so the code has to be executed on the interpreter. It's not compiled like Java, okay, which means it's slower. And that's what we need our web server to do. And thanks, Michael. Good list of some really popular sites that use PHP. So it's case sensitive. We need these tags. Our expressions end with semicolons. All right, so here's this is the class where we start pulling together a bunch of different components that we use. Right? So, you've already learned from Jeremy's class how to build HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, but those files are basically dumb. Web browser is a dumb client, and HTML its presentation only doesn't really contain a whole lot of logic or functionality. So why do we need exactly a language like PHP? Well, let's take a look at a few websites that you guys look at all the time. What's the first website you go to every day when you wake up? Whether it's on your computer or on your phone. You go to Google. Okay, we go to Twitter or Reddit. So let's go to Instagram or Discord. Okay, let's go to Twitter here first. So we'll go here to Twitter. So if we look at Twitter, what elements on this page are static, like they don't change? And what elements are dynamic? What things do you see first of all? Let's think first of all about what's static. Okay, yeah, the navigation's static, right? Doesn't matter what page I'm on. The logo, yep, is going to be static. Search bar is going to be here, yeah, on every page. It's here. No. Are the messages static? Right, the messages are actually going to be dynamic. If you go to your messages page, if you go to twitter.com/messages, right, you're going to see different messages from me. So the only things really that are static are the logo, the nav bar, and kind of the search bar. What things are dynamic on here? Yep, the feed. Yep, what's on the homepage? What else is dynamic? If you go to this same URL, twitter.com/home, yeah, the what's happening, the hashtags that I follow are going to be different. Yep. The notifications. Well, it wouldn't be static because it's going to be different for me and for you, right? So the name, the description, and the avatar, those are all dynamic. So where does all this stuff come from, right? How is it that we go to this same URL, yet we see different content? So there's some of the page is static, but most of what's here is dynamic. Alessio, yes, it is on the server. It's in a specific place on the server. Where is all the dynamic content stored on the server specifically? And the server is a powerful computer. So where does this content actually live inside the server? In what sort of container or software? Exactly. Thanks, Akeem. In the database. 20. So in the back end in general, yes, but the back end typically means the database, right? So in Twitter, it's got in the database, there's a profiles, there's a posts, there's a notifications, there's a messages. All these things are buckets or tables in the database inside of Twitter, right? And this is why you're taking the relational database course with Mazir. It's not exactly the file system would be things like, well, what things on this page would be in the file system? What can you see? Right, mostly the images and the media. Those things would be in the file system. The content would be in the database, and the supporting media files would be in the file system. Okay, so that's Twitter. Let's go to Reddit. So we've got a static kind of header, right? Header search bar, some buttons. And we've got a little side nav that's static. And again, everything else here is probably dynamic. So if Twitter's got things like posts, notifications, hashtags, profiles, messages, those are the tables in the Twitter database. What about in the Reddit database? What would the buckets or tables be in the Reddit database? How would the information be stored? Yeah, it would be similar. We'd have profiles, we've got posts, we've got subreddits, we've got communities, we've got ads. Yeah, Alessio said the feed, the trending. So both of these sites, it's really just querying the database to pull out relevant information and render it as HTML. So the PHP, it's like the messenger in between the HTML and the database in the backend. First, you can see my most common sites. So I go here most mornings, right? So what things are in the Sportsnet database? If we could look in there, what kinds of tables? Yeah, we'd see this. There'd be a scores table. Yep. What other content would Sportsnet have? Yeah, news feed, statistics. Yep. So all the articles with the media files. Right? It'd have the statistics, it'd have the ads, it has the standings data. So all of these are tables inside of the database that powers this website. Yep, all the player stats, profile information, if I had an account. So all of these websites that we visit every day, they all use this same structure, right? Almost all the content actually lives inside a database. So we need to use, we're presenting HTML pages, but we need some language like PHP or C# or JavaScript to do the interpretation. What does the user want in their browser? And how do we fetch out the right information to show them from the database? So the PHP or the other server-side script, it's kind of the brains. So in this class, what the good news is all web applications, no matter what the purpose is, if it's Reddit, if it's Twitter, if it's Sportsnet, if it's Amazon, if it's Instagram or Google, they all kind of use this same pattern. So once we understand the fundamentals, you should be able to build anything by the end of this class, any kind of website that somebody might ask you for. Just a standardized version of HTML. So the other piece of good news I have for you is for most people, this kind of seems like magic, right? Like, how can I use my phone or my computer and just get all this information? How do I have access to all this stuff? Well, they think it's magic. It's really just basic programming. It's using a server-side scripting language to interact with the database in the back end and HTML, JavaScript, and CSS on the front end. But because people think this is magic, this is why there's 3,000 job openings in Ontario for people who know how to do this. So every web application, it works the same way. It's really just displaying data from a database in some way. And the data structure, it's going to be different like for every database. So for Facebook, it would be similar to Twitter, right? We'd have things like profiles, posts, photos, likes. A store like Amazon, it's got products, categories, customers, reviews. This is the data. But the mechanics of how our web application works, it's the same for all of these. So that's what this class is all about. How do we put these pieces together? to build a web application. So the way I typically like to structure my classes is that we build every week in class, we're going to build one application for the whole semester for 4 months. And so every week we're going to add new features onto it. So here's what we did in last year's class. What we built was like a grocery list. So we built a website so when you went to the grocery store, you could have a list online and it was, mobile friendly. You could pull it up on your phone with your little hamburger menu. And we could add, edit, delete items from the grocery list. We added a little API call so we could see the current weather, where we were. We had security so we could register and log in, so we could add or edit from our grocery list. We could delete something. The confirmation goes away. I'd log into the site. Whoops. So we built this site out over 4 months. So what I want to do is, before we start coding, let's figure out what kind of site do you guys want to build. I don't want to build another grocery list. Let's build something else. So if you want to make a suggestion in the chat, I'll put up a little poll and we can take a vote. That's hilarious, Raj. So what kind of site do you want to build in class? Okay, let's see. We could do social media app. We could do a movie database. We could do a news channel. Board. Okay. All right, I think we've got enough options here. The image board, we will add the ability to upload images. But that's going to be tricky in terms of like our sequencing because we're going to do file uploads later. So I think I might have to exclude that one because we won't be able to cover file uploads till later in the class. So let me save and activate our poll. So here's the link. If you now go to polev.com/richfreeman521. So go here and you can vote. What do you want to build? All right. So it looks like, now my only challenge is to think this through for a minute. My other class also voted to build, because I teach the same class Monday mornings, different section for the web program. They also voted for a movie site. I'm just going to have to make sure I name things differently because I only have one database that I need to use. Yeah, you know what? I hate to do this, but this just occurred to me. I don't think I'm going to have issues because I only have one database to use. Okay, hang on. I'm gonna modify the poll. Bear with me. Sorry. I'm gonna take out movie for a minute. You're one of them. Let me just add. I'm gonna add a music library. as an option. We'll clear. Okay. All right. Probably music is a little more appreciated widely. Not everyone is an anime fan, but most people like some kind of music. Well, that's true, Raj. Okay, so it looks like music library. Well, you can do an anime site for your assignment. So don't despair. If your heart's set on anime in your assignments, much like in your Arduino class where you get to pick your project, you get to pick your project in this class as well. So if you want to build an anime site for your assignment, you certainly can. So do not despair. Okay, so let's go and make a folder for our project. And then we could try to play around a little bit with PHP. Okay. So I'm going to go into my inside my XAMPP folder. And I'm going to open up htdocs. So this is our root folder for our web server. So I'm going to make a new folder here. Maybe I'll call it PHP Tunes. So it's our music library using PHP. I'm going to make this PHP Tunes folder. And then I'm going to open up this folder in my code editor. So you can use htdocs should be inside of your XAMPP folder. If you installed the XAMPP server and started it, then you would have a XAMPP htdocs folder. So Dominic, make sure you ran the XAMPP installer. So I'm going to open up my PHP Tunes with Visual Studio Code. Okay, if you don't, so Terry, you said you don't have it, then you may have to search it, and then you may have installed it to a different path. Because the default is it will create the XAMPP and htdocs folders in your root drive. So you may need to search, maybe you installed, I don't know if you have another network drive. Yeah, so I made the PHP Tunes folder inside of XAMPP and htdocs. So if you're not seeing the XAMPP or htdocs folder, you may need to do a search on your drive for them. But this is the default location. Okay, Terry, if you do not have an htdocs, yeah, you might need to just click on view and refresh. Or just right click and refresh. Thank you, Dominic. So inside of XAMPP htdocs, make a PHP Tunes folder. And then open it up in whatever code editor you want to use. Visual Studio Code or Atom or PHP Storm, doesn't matter. Raj, we will deal with Git later. We're not going to use it today. We'll introduce Git and talk about it, but not today. So now that I have this folder, if my server is running, you can see my Apache server is green, I should be able to browse to it. So I can go to localhost/phptunes, and it shows me there's no files here. I have an empty directory. It says I've got a server running at localhost on my default port 80. So you should get a page that looks like this. So we're going to create a few simple PHP pages. So in my code editor, I'm going to make a new file, which I will call index.php. I'm going to add some basic HTML tags to it first. Doc type. I'll add a head section. Yep. Sure thing. So open up your PHP tunes, make a file called index.php, and we're going to just start putting some basic HTML in it first. So our PHP pages, they're going to be a mix of HTML markup and PHP. Alexander, you good? Okay. I'll put on a meta. Title. PHP tunes. And we'll just put on a body tag with a heading. So this is just, right now it's just static HTML. Try it out in my browser. So if I refresh now, we just get an HTML page. So let's experiment a little bit with a little bit of really basic PHP syntax. Now we said all our PHP code needs to be enclosed in PHP script tags. So my opening tag is an angled bracket, question mark PHP, and it closes with question mark and greater than. So in here we will create and display a variable. Did anybody, when you were doing your research about PHP, did anybody notice the syntax for declaring a variable in PHP? Thank you, Mike. Yeah, all variables are prefixed with the $sign. We'll create a variable. We'll call it first name. And I'll just put it in as, let's say, Rich. And now I want to print this variable to the screen. So how would we do this? Anybody find the command? PHP doesn't have we don't really use the print command. Yeah, that's right, Andrew. Mike, thank you. It was echo. And now I can just echo out. So this should print my variable, hopefully. Now I've got a red line here. How come? What's wrong with this? Thanks, Mike. Yeah, right. I'm missing the semicolon. So it interprets these two lines together and it says I'm missing a semicolon. You got it. So if I refresh, right, I get unexpected token because it can't run this command until this command is terminated. So when I add the semicolon, I don't have to have a semicolon after my last command, but I certainly need it to separate these two commands. So best practice, terminate all the commands with a semicolon. So now it prints out my variable. What will happen if I do this? So notice we didn't declare a data type. it's assuming it's a string because I've enclosed the value in quotes. Yet PHP will also allow me to do this. So I create it as a string, assign it a string. PHP will then allow me to change it to an integer. So in a language like Java, you can't do this. PHP is loosely typed, so it doesn't care. We can change the data type. Not really recommended, but we're allowed to do it. What will happen if I do this? Well, Raj, yeah, I mean, it's cool it prevents errors, but I actually don't like it because it means variables can be of a data type that we don't want. We don't have that strict type checking, which actually reduces errors. What do you think will happen if we run the page like this? Will it print 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3? Okay. Yep, Akimi agree. Yama says it's case sensitive. Oops, I'll save my change. Correct. First name. So we should be consistent with our casing. So I'm going to use camel case for like variable names, method names. I will always use camel case in this class because we'll get undefined. So we want to be consistent in how we do that. So I'll comment that out. I'll comment this out as well. I just wanted to show you it was possible to do that, but I don't recommend it. Now, what if I want to display a string that says my name is, and then I want the variable on the end? Raj, you would manually have to check the data type. So if you wanted an integer, you would be checking like there's an isNumeric function you would have to use if you wanted to ensure you got a number, for example. So how would we print out, how do you think we would print out my name is with the variable displaying at the end? So we want a literal string and a variable concatenated together. What do you think that code might look like? Okay, thanks, Alessio. Let's try that. I'll comment this out. Okay. So we've used double quotes and we've injected the variable. And my code editor suggests that it recognizes this is a variable. So that seems to work. I'm going to try it one other way. What if we do this? You'll notice that lines 14 and 15 actually look a little different. How come? Yeah, so we use double quotes here. And notice when I'm putting the cursor over $ first name, it recognizes it as a string variable. When I use single quotes, I don't get that little hint. And the color coding is different. You're exactly, Alessio. So this tells us if we want to inject double quotes into a string, if we want to inject a variable into a string, we can do it with double quotes, but not with single quotes. So any thoughts about how we might fix this? That's just the way the PHP interpreter runs. Thank you, Don. So in this case, if we want to use single quotes, we would close the quote and we would append. PHP is a really strange concatenator. In languages like Java and JavaScript and C#, it's a plus sign, which makes sense. Add one string onto the end of another. Join them together. PHP uses a dot, which is really bizarre. I don't know why it doesn't use a plus sign. So now these two are equivalent. So if I save, that helps. So line 14, it seems easier than line 15, doesn't it? Right? Why would we close the quote and append when we could just inject a variable? There actually is a good reason, though, why we will often use single quotes. Okay, yeah, we could print it on a new line. Well, by printing on a new line, sure, let's do that. So the way we would print it on a new line is we could add some HTML formatting to this. And then you're going to see in a minute why we might use this version. So here, we could put in a paragraph tag. So now it's inside of a paragraph tag. So I'm going to open the paragraph tag here. And now after my variable, we need to close it. So we're concatenating our variable, and now we're concatenating our end paragraph. And I realize we're almost due for a break. We don't have a ton more to do. So this works. So now it's more readable, it's on a new line. So we can use HTML formatting in our echo statements, and we can combine literal text and variables. So line 14 is simpler and more efficient. Can you think of any reason why would we ever use this syntax with single quotes? We'll actually use this version a lot in this class. Any idea why? $20, good guess. What if we want to format the paragraph tag? Yeah, Akeem, we could use loops. What if we have something like this? Maybe we have a class that formats our paragraph. When we have class or HTML attributes, they go inside of double quotes. So this will work, right? We can put double quotes inside the single quotes. We can't do it here. So now we get an error. The way we'd have to fix this is by escaping these. So now these are equivalent again. You could use either of these. I prefer this structure. So both would work, but if you use double quotes, you have to escape double quotes inside. If you use single quotes, we can put double quotes in here with no problem. They're still functionally equivalent. Okay, Raj, good question. I'll answer that question and then we'll take a break. PHP is separate from HTML, but they work together. They're partners. Okay? I'll try and explain in a couple of ways. HTML, remember, HTML is presentation only. There's no logic. So you can't use HTML, for example, to log into a database and fetch information. Right, PHP performs logic, but all of the presentation in the PHP is not a presentation language. It's a logic language. So they work together. The HTML is the presentation. So we use PHP to generate HTML dynamically, right? When we looked at all these websites, we said a lot of the content is dynamic, right? So it's presented as HTML, but the logic that determines what to show us and how to show us, that's done with a language like PHP. You got it, Raj. Here, I got another analogy. Let's think of it this way. Bear with me. Give me a minute to think of another way to put it. So the PHP does all the logic and processing. And the HTML, yeah, the HTML CSS makes it pretty. That's what renders in the browser. So when we look at the source, you notice it's server-side script. Do you see any PHP on this page? There's no PHP code showing. It does the logic on the server, but it just sends HTML presentation to the browser. We don't see the PHP tags. We don't see the echo commands. We only see the output. So HTML is like the brains behind the scenes. No, you can't. The only way you can see it is if you have access to the server. We don't want the user, right? Twitter doesn't want to show us their server-side logic. They only want to show us the presentation, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's why it's called server-side script. It lives on the server and executes on the server. And it just renders HTML. So this is why we've got these components working together. And this is what I mean when I say all web applications, they actually work the same way. But it's the server-side script that really is the engine of every website. It handles all of the logic and functionality, but it only gives users access to the HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So you guys did this with Jeremy last semester. Now we're going to work on the back-end pieces and putting it all together, which I think, yeah, is interesting and cool. Okay, it's 2:10. We don't have a lot more to do, but I think we should take a little break. Let's come back at 10 after 2. We'll play around with PHP just a little bit more. We'll build maybe 2 more files, and then we'll break for the week. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break here.